Wall Street in 1785 was a muddy lane lined with wooden houses where pigs roamed freely, and most buildings still had bullet holes from the Revolution. Today it controls trillions of dollars and shapes the fate of nations. The street that existed then has been erased so completely that not a single structure from that era remains. What almost no one realizes is that Wall Street's first stock traders conducted business under a buttonwood tree because they had been kicked out of a coffee house for being too loud. Using tax records, insurance maps, and traveler accounts from the 1780s, I can now show you what that forgotten street actually looked like. The contrast between what it was and what it became is almost impossible to believe. Wall Street was named after an actual wall, a wooden palisade built by the Dutch in 1653 and torn down in 1699. In 1785, the street was only 40 feet wide, unpaved in sections and lined, primarily with 2- and 3-story wooden and brick structures. The eastern end, near the East River waterfront, was commercial, while the western end near Broadway held private residences. City tax records from 1785 show Wall Street had 38 taxable properties between Broadway and William Street alone. Picture this. You are standing at the corner of Wall Street and William Street on a June morning in 1785. The street surface is hard-packed dirt with scattered cobblestones, rutted by cartwheels. A pig roots through refuse near a wooden fence. The buildings around you are modest, mostly 2-story structures with shops on the ground floor. Their wooden shutters open for business. To your east, perhaps 200 yards away, you can see ship masts rising above the rooftops where Wall Street meets the East River docks. The smell of salt water mixes with wood smoke and horse manure. Pigs were legally allowed to roam Wall Street as free garbage disposal until 1821, and contemporary accounts describe them as a constant presence. The street that now represents global financial power was then distinguished mainly by the smell of livestock and the absence of proper drainage. Francisco de Miranda, a Venezuelan traveler who visited New York in 1783, described the streets of Lower Manhattan as crude and unimpressive compared to European capitals. His account survives in detailed journals that offer one of the few glimpses into the physical reality of the city during this period. But one building on this unremarkable street was about to change everything. The Merchants' Coffee House, built in 1737, stood at the southeast corner of Wall Street and Water Street until it burned in 1804. It was a 3-story wooden building with a long room on the ground floor where merchants, ship captains, and traders gathered daily. Auctions of goods, ships, and enslaved people were conducted in front of the building under a covered portico. In 1785, informal securities trading happened inside until the noise and disorder led proprietors to ask traders to leave. Step inside the long room of the Merchants' Coffee House on an autumn afternoon in 1785. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of coffee and rum. Perhaps 30 men crowd the space, some seated at small tables, others standing in clusters, talking loudly over each other. A ship captain describes cargo just arrived from Canton. 2 men in the corner argue over the price of continental debt certificates, voices rising. The wooden floorboards are stained dark and slightly sticky. Through the wavy glass windows, you can see the East River just across Water Street and the forest of masts at the docks. The first stocks being traded were not corporate shares, but government bonds, Continental Congress debt certificates that many veterans had sold for pennies on the dollar. The birthplace of American capitalism was a coffee house that kicked out the capitalists for being disruptive. Robert Francis Siebold, in his study of colonial New York, published in 1918, documented the central role of coffeehouses in commercial life. They were not merely social spaces, but unofficial exchanges where fortunes were made and lost in conversations over coffee and tobacco. An advertisement in the New York Packet from March 1784 lists the Merchants' Coffee House as the preferred venue for ship auctions and cargo sales. When the traders were forced outside, they gathered under a tree that still stood on the street. The Buttonwood tree stood in front of 68 Wall Street, near the corner of William Street, providing shade for informal outdoor meetings. On May 17, 1792, 24 stockbrokers signed the Buttonwood Agreement under or near this tree, establishing trading rules and commission rates. The tree was a sycamore species, common in lower Manhattan before urbanization. By the early 1800s, the original tree was gone, but the location became symbolically sacred to the financial community. Imagine approaching from Broadway on a May morning in 1792. About halfway down Wall Street, you see a cluster of perhaps 24 men gathered beneath a large sycamore tree on the north side of the street. Some lean against the iron fence behind them. Others stand in the dappled shade, holding papers and speaking in low voices. One man produces a document and spreads it on a wooden crate. The men take turns signing. The street continues its ordinary business around them. A cart rattles past. A woman carries a basket toward the market. No one watching would guess they are witnessing the birth of an institution that will outlive everyone present by centuries. The Buttonwood Agreement was partly a response to a financial panic 1 month earlier, caused by speculator William Jewer, who had defaulted on massive debts and was in debtor's prison when the agreement was signed. The founding document of the New York Stock Exchange was signed outdoors under a tree, because the men involved had no permanent building and no legal status. The original agreement, preserved in the New York Stock Exchange archives, is a single page written in plain commercial language. It contains no grand statements about capitalism or democracy, just practical rules about commissions and preferential trading among signers. Robert Sobel, in his History of the New York Stock Market, published in 1965, notes that the agreement was less a revolutionary manifesto than a guild arrangement meant to exclude competitors. Within 2 years, those same men would move indoors permanently, and the street would begin its transformation. The Great Fire of 1835 destroyed most buildings on Wall Street between William and Hanover Streets, consuming structures that had stood since the 1780s. By 1840, every wooden building from the 1785 streetscape had been replaced with brick or stone commercial structures. The street was widened twice, first in 1789 and again in 1836, changing its physical dimensions permanently. No building standing on Wall Street today predates 1836. The oldest survivor is 55 Wall Street, built in 1836 through 1841. When Federal Hall was demolished in 1812, the building where George Washington took his oath as president, the rubble was used as landfill, and today it lies buried under the streets of Lower Manhattan's waterfront expansion. Wall Street preserved its name and its function with obsessive care while erasing every physical trace of its founding era. Insurance maps from the Insurance Company of North America, surveyed after the 1835 fire, show the extent of the destruction. Nearly every lot on the south side of Wall Street, east of William Street, was listed as total loss. Street widening ordinances from 1789 and 1836, held in the New York City Municipal Archives, document the formal decisions to reshape the street for heavier commercial traffic. The street you can visit today occupies the same legal route, but it shares nothing material with the place where American finance began. The bronze statue of a bull now stands near the spot where pigs once wandered freely, and the narrow canyon of skyscrapers follows the exact path of a dirt road where 24 men signed an agreement under a tree that no longer exists. I have spent weeks reconstructing something that was never photographed, never celebrated, and never mourned when it disappeared. The Wall Street that mattered most is the one nobody can visit. If there is another lost place you want me to reconstruct, let me know in the comments.